What's going on, everybody? This Afro think tank. White woman says white Republicans are trying to block black people from political representation in this country. And that's exactly what's happening. I need you guys to wrap your heads around what's happening right now all over America. Right now, all right? White people are having I'm gonna start from, I'm gonna try to build a picture for you so you can kind of see and understand why this is happening. White people are going extinct. What does that mean? That means the places that they reside, right, they're not producing enough babies to replace their population. They are, all white people globally, are on a irreversible, you hear me what I said? Irreversible demographic decline, meaning generation after generation, there'll be less and less and less and less white people. What does that mean? That means all of the colonies, because America is a colony, all right? It's big, it's powerful, it's a colony because it doesn't belong to white people. It's just the most successful colony outside of Europe. But the colonies of Europe, currently right now, all of them globally, because they're having this demographic decline, they don't have the numbers to operate the states in which they run. The institutions and the foundations in which they created, they don't have the numbers to control it. Now in America, because we are a democracy, it's always been a numbers game. At one point, Europeans had the numbers. But what's happening in each individual state is that Europeans are no longer having the numbers, especially in the conservative red states, which are usually the former Confederate states, which are usually the most white states, which are usually the most uneducated states, which are usually the welfare states, meaning the states that receive federal funds paid for by the states that are rich, which are the democratic states, which are the educated states, which are the states that produce and generate income for America, which are the states in which African people reside mostly. Because African people in America only live 100 miles away from from their former plantations in which they were the physical economic engine of America. Therefore, all the white corporations still reside in those very same places because those resources are still there and they're still being sourced today under a different name. You're not a slave, you're an employee. And black folks still work for the corporations and industries that used to formerly enslave us because the families of those enslavers are still in charge and they own all the corporations that provide us services and products. But the poor white person in the middle of America who was sent out there from Europe to log, to mine, to also be slaves, but under another name, given a fake identity of white in order for them to separate themselves from the poor blacks that were being subjugated by those very same rich white people, those poor white people no longer have a source of income because coal is not as big as it used to be. Lumber is not as big as it used to be. Also, there's competition from other countries. And there's nothing to do in the middle of America other than what white people like to do, which is play with children and dominate their families in medieval ways. Right? So all the states within the middle of America, these poor white racist states, all of them are losing more and more white men as their children are going off to universities and moving to the richer states where people have a progressive and liberal and different mindsets. They can't maintain the population that they're creating because they are leaving and changing their ideologies. And they can't continue to propagate their propaganda with the ones that stand within their little villages and their little towns and their little areas in order to keep the white supremacy going. They can't do that because those people are miserable and they're murdering themselves and they're going off and shooting up schools and they just unproductive members of society and they don't care about voting. Therefore, when it comes to voting, because voting actually works, because if voting didn't work, they wouldn't work so hard to stop black people from voting. They wouldn't kill us. They wouldn't terrorize us. They wouldn't make legislation to stop us, and they wouldn't have to worry about gerrymandering, because if voting didn't work, they would allow us to go vote and think that we're participating while they go behind the doors and they do what they're going to do anyway. No, voting works. Smart voting works. It's how you vote. That's what's important. So white people don't have the votes. They also don't have the jobs within their states to generate the tax income that the state needs to operate their white supremacist networks and institutions. They don't have the money to finance their white supremacist institutions and systems. They are losing power politically. They're losing power economically. Their businesses are failing because the few rich white people are shutting down the lesser rich people, or the upper middle class and the middle class. They're being shut down because their businesses can't compete with Walmart. Their businesses can't compete with Best Buy. Their businesses can't compete with Amazon. So the few white people on the top are destroying the 80% of the white people on the bottom, while the 80% of white people at the bottom are also going extinct. Therefore, they have to gerrymander. They have to make it so those 5 white people have just as much political power, if not more political power, than the hundreds of black people right next to them. And that 13%, 15% population is obviously a lie. Because if we're only 15% of America's population spread out through this massive country, spread out through massive districts in different states, you tell them we have that much economic power where we're a threat? Clearly, African Americans are a bigger demographic than they would like us to believe. Either we are a super, mega, uber rich group of people who went from underneath to mud to all the way to the top of society, right? With our little 15% population, we would be the most, if that's the case, we're the most successful group of people on the planet, despite our disposition. Or there's a lot more of us than they would have, like to admit. Either way, it's an L for them. So they're going to try to redistrict these states that have so few people. Most of America's empty, by the way. Did you know that? Most of America's empty. We actually need more people in the country because we need people to work and generate tax income, because taxes is what feeds the states. Taxes is what feeds the federal government. Taxes is how America uses its economic power to dominate the world. And if the white society can't generate the tax money to dominate the world, they no longer dominate the world. I need you to understand that. And that, in fact, is what's going on. I hope you understand what I'm saying. They are basically a rat in a corner looking at their impending death. And like a rat in the corner who knows they are looking at their impending death, they are doing everything and all things with no shame because they are in fact in survival mode. White society globally are in survival mode due to their own policies, due to their relationship with the planet, due to their relationship with other group of people. This is all 100% their fault. And I have no empathy for them at all. Anyway, you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn some, teach them. I'm out.
If you've been following the news, you've probably heard about the Supreme Court's disastrous decision in the Voting Rights Act case, Louisiana versus Calais, which somehow the Supreme Court decided to make even worse. So in Calais, the 6 Republican appointees, in an opinion by Justice Alito, nullified what remains of the Voting Rights Act. Specifically, the court made it possible for white, Republican-controlled state legislatures to lock Black voters and other voters of color out of political power by drawing districts such that Black voters are in the minority in every single district, and therefore never get to elect the candidate of their choice. The decision allows states to ensure that every single district produces a Republican elected official. That's why Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn called on Tennessee, the state she represents, to redistrict to make the state red. It is a way of state legislatures allowing elected officials to basically entrench themselves in power and erase the votes of anyone who disagrees with them politically. And the Supreme Court's decision lets states do that, even in states like Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana, where a third of the state's voters are Black. States can still draw the districts in ways to ensure Black voters' votes basically don't count. I mean, the Alabama governor, no joke, posted a proposed map that included 0 opportunity districts where Black voters could elect their preferred candidate. This slate would ensure, again, that all of Alabama's representatives are Republican, even though many of the state's voters vote Democratic, at least a third of the state. That decision was already all kinds of messed up. After all, it's a way of erasing the political power of minority voters. It's a way of erasing the political power of any voter who disagrees with the political party that's in the majority of the state legislature. It's a way of allowing states to erase districts that elect officials who are racial minorities, and that's going to make Congress less diverse. And brazenly and hypocritically, the Supreme Court issued this decision, even though elections in many places are already underway, including in Louisiana, where the Calais case is from. The governor of Louisiana suspended the primaries for the House elections to allow the state to redraw its districts rather than conduct an election under a set of districts that allow Black voters to elect candidates of their choice. And part of what makes this so galling is that in many other cases, the Supreme Court has blocked lower court decisions by saying, oh, those federal courts, they were fiddling with election rules too close to an election, and you just can't do that. It's too chaotic. That was actually a reason the Supreme Court gave for blocking decisions during the COVID era out of Wisconsin, where courts attempted to get the state to extend its deadline for receiving ballots by mail because so many people were voting by mail. The Supreme Court said, nope, you can't change the rules. You're doing so too close to an election. The idea that federal courts can't change the rules too close to an election was also a reason the court gave for blocking a decision in December 2025 out of Texas. That decision had concluded Texas's redrawn districts in the gerrymandering wars were unconstitutional racial discrimination. The Supreme Court said, oh, December 2025, that's too close to an election because candidates need to declare for districts and there are primaries. Fast forward now, and it's May 2026, and the Supreme Court comes along and says, oh, we're going to fiddle with the election rules in Louisiana on the eve of an election. And again, it gets even worse. As I was saying, the court obviously isn't consistent, hasn't been consistent about when it says it's too close to an election for a federal court to do something about a state's election rules, even if they are illegal or unconstitutional. The court also decided to depart from its usual rules about when to release the so-called judgment or mandate in the case. So basically, the usual course is that the Supreme Court will release its opinion, and then it will wait for at least 30 days to issue what's called the judgment or mandate. And the judgment or mandate is kind of what makes the opinion official. It's what returns the case to a lower court, and it gives force to the Supreme Court's opinions. Basically, the court is saying, you have to act on this now. So the Supreme Court decided, rather than waiting at least 30 days to issue the judgment in Calais, the Voting Rights Act case, it decided to do so less than a week after it issued the opinion. That is a way of nudging Louisiana along and freeing them, if not encouraging them, to adopt new districts that lock out Black voters and do that now. Because before the mandate issued, Louisiana wasn't subject to a court mandate telling them to redraw new districts. So basically, the Supreme Court made it easier for Louisiana and other states to hurry up and disenfranchise Black voters and lock Black voters out of power, and Democratic voters too. And because it always gets worse, Sam Alito wrote separately to complain about.
The news continues as we approach 4:30. Tennessee's governor has signed into law a new U.S. House map, a congressional map, which carves up a majority Black district in Memphis, pretty much removing any Democratic representation.
And now Democratic Representative Steve Cohen, who represents Memphis, is threatening a lawsuit.
Local 3's Logan Dubel has been following this story. Logan is live in Nashville with the latest, and it changes every few minutes, Logan.
Yeah, David, it really does. I just checked on social media, and Congressman Steve Cohen just put out a statement a couple of minutes ago saying that the next stop is the courts. So definitely we'll be keeping an eye on that. Our Senator London Lamar, who you heard from just in the last 30 minutes, she says that she's planning to help raise money for action on all of this. So, of course, we'll be watching to see where this goes in terms of litigation. You'll remember that throughout this entire process, Republicans who I've asked have told me, including Representative Kevin Raper from in our area in Cleveland, he said that this is righting a wrong in terms of the litigation because of the Supreme Court decision last week that started all of this. So we'll see how that plays out. One thing that I do want to point out that we just got a message from the Tennessee Secretary of State talking about the impact that this is going to have on the upcoming midterm election. That message that we just got says that additional candidates may qualify for primary or general elections that remain between now and noon on Friday, May 15th. So next week. It also says, and I'll continue diving into this, but that candidates who previously qualified for 2026 congressional elections may run in the new district that has the same district number, and candidates who wish to change districts or withdraw may do so. So, of course, we'll be watching to see the impact that this has on the 2026 race. Now, we know that there have been so many people here demonstrating, not just today, but all throughout the week. It really came to a head with all of those emotions this afternoon as this bill passed both the House and the Senate. Here's sound from one demonstrator that I talked to about the impact that she says this is going to have, not just in Memphis, but all around the state.
Redistricting midterm is a challenge, although it's become very popular across the country, and it has strong political ramifications. But it's important that we remember that redistricting should occur every 10 years with the census. I want to make sure that people are prepared to vote this summer and fall, and this process created some confusion, and I did not want to contribute to that confusion.
And so there you heard from Representative Greg Vital. Actually, we'll get to that sound from that demonstrator coming up at 5. But again, that was Representative Greg Vital explaining why he says he passed on this. Also, one other local note is that Hamilton County Representative Michelle Renaud, she also abstained on the vote. She declined an interview this afternoon, but we have heard a statement from her before we actually came back to the special session over the weekend. And she talked about some of the unease that she felt in this process, some of the similar feelings that we heard Representative Vital voice this afternoon. David, Sydney?
And I have a question for you. You're like us. You keep up with politics. You enjoy following politics. You took civics and government classes in high school and college. And there's a way we were taught that government works. What you've observed the last day or two in Nashville, does this reflect what you were taught in school, or is it somewhat different?
Well, David, we often talk about how slow government moves. And one thing that I've learned in the last couple of days of being here in Nashville is that when they want to move fast, they certainly can, because, again, this is just a 3-day special session. And when you think about it, Tuesday was really a quick procedural day. Yesterday, everything moved through the committees. And then today, it was a pretty quick day. The Democrats in the House proposed 37 different amendments to keep things slowed down there. But obviously, we know that that all ended and they passed everything through with support from Republicans. So definitely, at least we know they did change the law to make it so that they can make these new congressional maps in between census years. We know there won't be another census until 2030, and then normally those reapportionments would happen after that. So definitely a different precedent that we've seen now here in the last few days in Nashville, David.
Yeah, a lot of us grew up watching Schoolhouse Rock, and everything looked so orderly. Remember, I'm Just a Bill? Yes. How everything just got passed. It's been a little more chaotic than that in Nashville this week. Well, we know you got a lot to cover, Logan. We'll get back to you later on our newscast. Thank you.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.